My name's Abigayle, and I just wanted to thank you guys for tuning into this video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my health history and how that has just kind of affected my life, and possibly mentions of some of my testimony throughout there and how my health has played, I think, a pretty big important role in that over time. In my previous videos, I talked a lot about the RLDS and restoration and kind of my upbringing in that and how I felt like I was really targeted by not only different students and peers my age, but the staff and adults in my life at the time. And I think a lot of it had to do with my health issues, which is really unfortunate. But a little quick dive into my testimony. I was raised in a home that we went to church, and I was enrolled in this private Christian school, and the church and this school talked about Jesus, and he was this man who died on the cross for us, but it didn't really go any deeper than that, and that was it. And we needed to pray and read our Bibles and do all these things to be saved, but I don't ever remember them teaching us how to have like a personal relationship with the Lord. And I didn't learn that until my freshman year of college, after a very sweet girl who pursued me in friendship and really just loved me like the Lord would, and she had no agenda to get me to be saved. She just wanted to know me personally, and she also wanted me to come to these ministry things because she was a part of them, and I was very stubborn about going, but I eventually said yes after some personal events in my life that really shook my core and made me realize that I didn't have anything in life, and if I didn't have anything in life, then what did I have to lose to try this church thing out again? And not long after that, I ended up accepting Jesus, and I'll just never forget it. We were reading through Ephesians chapter 2. It finally clicked for me that I didn't have to do anything to earn love. And that was such like a pivotal moment for me, because I had spent my entire life feeling like I had to earn love to be worthy of friendship, to be noticed. My home life wasn't very good at the time. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but and I'm not going to go into detail about it because I'm in a really good spot with most of my family members, and I have moved and healed from that, and it's not something that is so present in my mind anymore, but it's not something that I'm comfortable with sharing on the internet. One, because I don't want to really go through relive all of that, but two, there are some people in that story that I don't want anyone else having false notions of the type of person they are now, because a lot of people have really grown in my life and really done better and really taken the time to make amends, and so that's just not something that I'm going to talk about right now. But it did really affect, I didn't have good relationships when I was a child with a lot of the adults in my life, and just a lot of people in my life, and so I felt like I was always having to be good at something or be good enough to earn love, and that just wasn't the case. Like, there was literally nothing I was capable of doing that was going to earn myself salvation or make Jesus love me more. Like, that was just not physically possible. And so when that really clicked, like, all the walls came down. But I talked a lot about the RLDS because what I remember is I knew coming into college way more information about like Joseph Smith and essentially his disciples and the journey of the Nephites, which are like a family or a clan they talk about in the Book of Mormon that traveled from. So I don't know this history very well either, so I gotta be really careful about how I speak about this. But they traveled from presumably like Israel to the Promised Land, which was America. But they talk about the Promised Land in the Bible being sorry, I don't want to just say Israel, but in that area. And so that was really clashing, but I knew more about Joseph Smith and his journey in life and how the Book of Mormon came to be than I did about Jesus and his 12 disciples. Like, I don't, and partly this is because I didn't pay attention in school because I could care less to learn about this at the time. But they didn't talk about it often enough for me to recognize they talked about it more than one time. But yeah, I have left the RLDS. I'm not here to put anyone down if that's what they still believe in, but I personally think that it is wrong and there's a lot of contradictions. And I feel like the RLDS has become very works-based, very focused on the law, which is the whole reason that Jesus came in the first place, was to abolish the law. He lived a perfect life. He followed the law perfectly, and through his death and his sacrifice, he fulfilled the law, so he became the law, and we don't have to do that anymore. But I feel like what I experienced while I was in the RLDS and things I've heard about since just makes me feel like they care more about the law than they actually do about people having a personal relationship and knowing Jesus personally. So, sorry. So I have a lot of just problems with that in general, but that's not why we're here today. I gave you a brief, quick view of my testimony of how I came to Jesus Christ. But we're going to backtrack to when I was 11 and in 5th grade, or right before 5th grade. I had my yearly doctor's appointment, and they had me like stand up and then bend over and touch my toes or the floor to look at my back, which they do this to see if you have scoliosis, and they could in fact see that I had a spinal curvature. And so then I was given is it a reference? Or that's not what a reference is. A referral. Sorry, my stomach is really upset. I don't know why that is. That's so gross. I was given a referral to go see a child specialist at Children's Mercy, and they did a whole set of x-rays, and then they came back and told me, hey, you do have scoliosis, and scoliosis is just an abnormal spinal curvature. A lot of people actually have really mild scoliosis, which can be 20 degrees or less, or even 10 degrees or less. I was sitting somewhere in the 25 to 35 range, I believe. I had an S-curve. There's a lot of different curvatures for scoliosis, and I believe there are several types of scoliosis, but I specifically was diagnosed with idiopathic scoliosis, and that just means they don't know what's causing me to have scoliosis. So this started the process of me having to get fitted for a back brace. They had a special make me one that set all around my torso, up underneath my armpits, which was really uncomfortable. And then when that was printed, they went in and added like hard foam padding on the inside to push against where the spinal curvature was out. So if my spine was straight and it ended up having a little bit of a bend, they would put that foam pad here to create that pressure to push. One, to help possibly readjust my spine a little bit, but two, as you continue to grow, your curve can get worse. And so I was only 11, and girls don't reach the age of maturity until like ages 15 or 17. And so they needed to slow the progression of my curvature as much as possible, because for a lot of people or a lot of kids, they end up needing surgery in life, and they were trying to avoid that because that is a very extensive and what's the word I'm looking for? Invasive, that's the word. Really invasive surgery. And it's not something that you can ever take out. And there's a lot of risks associated with that surgery, and so they were really trying to prevent that. I also, with this back brace, I had to wear it for 20 hours every single day, which means I did have to sleep in it. The only times I could take it off were to bathe or for physical activity. And so I have that 4 hours of free period that I can have it off. And then the nice part was, if I was being physically active in sport or something, I could have it off for longer. And so I played a lot of soccer as a kid, and I continued that throughout middle school. And so I would get those extra hours from really milking that, because that thing was so uncomfortable. It was extremely painful because you're literally trying to alter the direction that your bones are trying to grow in, which is just not pleasant. And then my clothes didn't fit right. Like, I couldn't really bend at my hips with it on because parts of it went over my hips. And then I was the only kid in school who had a back brace like that. And I could wear it underneath my clothes, but I mean, you could see the outline underneath it. So it didn't really matter. There were a few other girls who were like, oh, I have scoliosis too, but it was really mild, and they didn't have to wear a back brace. Yeah, I'm going with this. Anyways, I had this brace for 3 years, and I grew so fast I needed a new one every 9 months, but insurance would only pay for a new one once a year. And actually, I don't remember the first type of back brace I had, but the second kind, I had a Boston back brace. It was supposed to be different. I'm not sure. And then with these back braces too, you would get to pick out like a special like pattern or design that they would print on it, so it was like cuter and more fun and less like terrible that I had to wear this, you know? And so I became very acquainted with doing physical therapy and everything like this. Also, side note, I couldn't even fit in some of the desks, like the that I had to sit in at school, and it was the desks that had like that. They had like the desk part, and then they had the arm part that like connected to the chair. Like, I couldn't fit in those, and I couldn't really wear pants, which I'm really thankful that we had school uniforms at the time, because all the girls were wearing skirts, and so I could wear like shorts underneath my brace and then put my skirt like on the outside over my brace. So that really helped actually in that regard, but terrible time. I had to wear it every year of middle school. I had to sleep in it, like, terrible time. Anyways, my 8th grade year, and I had to do yearly checkups at least, like that at the very minimum. I had to get new x-rays every year and have my yearly appointment, follow-ups and everything. In my 8th grade year, they discovered that the back brace was actually making my curvatures worse, and so they're like, you're done, you're not wearing that anymore. This was also the year that they discovered another type of spinal curvature, I had kyphosis. So I not only had that S curve in the spine, so if I'm sitting straight on, it like is a side to side curve. My kyphosis curve made me look like a hunchback because my like shoulders were rounded really bad. And this, they said, was just because I had poor posture. But this was also the time that I started having a lot more chronic pain symptoms. I started having some stomach problems. I was in the hospital for a week because I got really bad gastritis, which just means the lining of my stomach got really inflamed. It made me really sick. And I had that going on. I would get terrible, terrible pains in my legs. My legs would get swollen. And the doctors told me and my parents that it was just growing pains because now as an adult, I'm almost 6'2". And so I was always the tallest kid, and I was always growing a lot. And so they just told my family that it was growing pains or that my legs were growing too fast, etc., etc. But this is where things started going like really downhill for me. At this time, home was not good, school was not good, my health was not good, and so mentally I was just not doing well. I really suffered from anxiety and depression, and I think this played a role into me not feeling good. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to be at home. I just wanted to sleep. Like, I did not want to be coherent or anything. And then you add on top of this, physically I'm not feeling well. And when I started having these chronic pain problems, of course my back hurt. We thought it was just like the scoliosis and me growing and having to wear back braces and things. They said my muscles were really weak, and so in physical therapy we were trying to strengthen those muscles. It got so bad that I was in the emergency room every week crying and screaming in pain. And they told my parents, darling, we've done all the tests, we can't find anything wrong with her, we don't know what's wrong with her. There seems to be nothing wrong with her. Is she going through higher levels of stress than normal? Because they wanted to chalk it up to me just having an anxiety disorder. And at the time I wasn't having good mental health. My parents were not aware of this, but like things were really, really painful for me. They tested me for like morphines, lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, Raynaud's, all of those things, and they were like, yeah, she doesn't have any of that stuff. Like, we don't know what's wrong with her. Eventually, they settled on a diagnosis of chronic regional pain syndrome, which just meant that my threshold for tolerating pain was not as good as somebody else's, essentially. So if someone has like on a scale of 1 to 10, like a threshold of 5, if 5, or I guess maybe 5 isn't a good number. Let's say the threshold of pain is like a 2. That's everybody's like normal, constant, whatever. My normal constant was an 8. And so little things would send me over the edge because my threshold was already taken up by my other inflammatory problems with my back and things like that. They also told my mom that chronic regional pain syndrome is equivalent in kids, at least, to, or they consider it, the adolescent fibromyalgia. And my mom had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and so we saw this as normal. I was sent to a pain clinic, and a pain clinic just teaches you how to cope and live with the pain. So I did a lot of, they gave me a TENS unit, which just like helps block the muscle signals. That one kind of helped. Every appointment I would get to choose to do like yoga or some like fun thing. I always chose to get a back massage. that always felt so good for like an hour. That was probably the best part. They taught me about like sense therapy. Like they used to give me like an essential oil to smell to like help breathe through the pain. That stuff didn't work. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I would go and I would do my thing, and it's like, yes, I'm doing my breathing exercises, I'm trying to breathe through the pain, yes, I'm doing mindfulness, yes, I'm stretching. Didn't work. Anyways, I continued in that program or that clinic until I graduated out of Children's Mercy when I was an adult. And so this really started just a long process of, I never really felt good. I would get lightheaded and dizzy a lot. It was just rough. It was really rough, honestly. I was just in pain all the time. I didn't have a good home life. I didn't have a good time at school. I felt left out intentionally and made fun of by my peers and by the staff of the school that I went to, and just things like that. The only good thing in my life at that time was I used to be a volunteer for the local zoo in their teen program, and I would get to go and work with the animals during the summer. And that really was the highlight of my life during that time. But going into adulthood was hard because I had all of these doctors and everything set up, and when I turned 18, they were like, yeah, we can't see you anymore. And they helped me transition, and I stayed on a little bit longer, probably like ages of 19 or 20, because of my health and things. And they said I was all good, that my curves would stop progressing, like I was going to be stuck at that mid-20s the rest of my life. I was always going to have kyphosis and things. I mean, that's where I was at. So I went into college thinking this is just how life was going to be. It is what it is. But my health issues only continued to decline into adulthood. They didn't at first, but I could tell. I started having a lot harder time sitting for extended periods of time, standing for extended periods of time. I was hurt all the time, like really bad in pain. And this went on for several years. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. But it's like one of those things you don't really notice because you just get used to it. It's kind of like the frog in a boiling pot. If you throw a frog in when the water is boiling hot, it's going to jump out. But if you put a frog in and you slowly turn the heat up over time, it'll end up staying in there and dying because it's not such a stark adjustment. It's like a slow adjustment, and that was what I was going through. This was also around the time that I lost health insurance for a few years, and so I couldn't really go see anybody. I was very limited on my options. I found a doctor who did sports medicine. I needed like a neurosurgeon or a spine specialist, but the sports doctors that we went with. And it was because it worked well for a while. Like he would do, he wasn't a chiropractor, but he could do like chiropractic adjustments like on me, and that always made me feel really good afterwards. That was short-lived. But then it had been 3 or 4 years, and I was in college. I was in my junior and senior year, and the pain started getting so bad that I couldn't even do the things that I loved. Like, were really painful, and I'd end up in tears afterwards. Like, I love doing photography, and I loved like going to concerts, but I couldn't stand through the length of a concert without going home and being in tears. And it turned into me having to sit on the floor in between sets. I was in pain, uncomfortable the entire time. It was just rough, and then I couldn't carry that camera and the camera gear with me. I was noticing it was getting a lot more difficult. It was just so painful, and I specifically remember I had an internship in college for the university where I was doing marketing photography, and I went to take photos of something late at night, and I came back and I tried to lay on the floor of the studio and I cried because I was in so much pain. And so I ended up going back to the sports medicine doctor, and I said, hey, something is wrong. Like I can't, like this, I'm just in pain all the time. I started flunking classes because I couldn't make it to class, like I didn't feel well. I was missing a lot of class in college. Typically you get like 3 free days, and if you miss more than that, you get dropped like a letter grade. And if you miss so many dates, they'll just fail you automatically no matter how good your work is. And this was and I got away with it a little bit more than I could have because of COVID, and we were hybrid a lot. But then I was falling behind, and I had studio classes, and I couldn't get to the studio to work on my stuff, and I wasn't there for critique, and then I felt really guilty, and so I missed more time because I was just so behind. And then I started flunking classes, and my mental health started taking it this time because I was like, things just weren't going the way I thought they were. I was miserable again. Like I wasn't having a quality of life. And I remember that I would tell myself, okay, I'm just going to try harder next semester. It'll be fine. And I would do really good. I would push really hard. And then by the middle of the semester, midterms, I'm burnt out. I can't do it. I'm dying. It's just bad. And so my super senior semester, so it would have been into my 5th year, my first semester. I had an extra year because of of me just failing classes, honestly, or having to withdraw. Which just made me feel so shameful and like a failure, which I know is not true now. But I just really struggled with that. But I started that semester, and the billing office got a hold of me the first week of classes, and they said, hey, you have an overdue balance. Like, if you don't get this taken care of, then you're gonna have to leave. And I'm 2.5 hours away. I'm supposed to be starting these classes. I don't have $2,500. I don't know what happened with my bill. It was from the summer. I don't know what happened. It was a mess. Thankfully, we were able to get a loan through Sallie Mae quickly. And I prayed really hard. I was like, Lord, if I'm supposed to be here, like, please let this financial stuff like work out and go through, because I really want to finish my degree and I want to graduate. And it was so hard because I had watched all of my friends graduate on time or early, and here I still am. Like, Abigail's a failure, you know. Abigail can't get her act together. Abigail's lazy. I was really struggling with the idea of my self-worth. It's just hard. But I ended up going to see the doctor I'd been seeing, and he did x-rays and was like, your spine, other than your scoliosis curves, looks fine. It doesn't look like it's progressed at all. He did not have the right equipment to measure me. He had to piece together my x-rays into 3 pieces. Instead of taking one, he didn't have the machinery to take one whole x-ray of my back. It was like broken up into 3 sections. And then he didn't even have like the digital up-to-date like measuring tools for scoliosis. He like just measured it himself. I don't know. He was like, your curvatures have not progressed. Like, your spine doesn't look, other than your scoliosis, your spine looks fine, right? And so I needed to get an MRI done after that. And so I went ahead and got an MRI and stuff. And we were really worried that I was having something called humeral nodes again, which I forgot to mention earlier. When I was 17-ish, I was diagnosed with, and they're like these little nodules that sit, like they push into your discs in your spine, and they're equivalent to a herniated disc. That's how they feel. And when I was in high school, they like riddled my spine, and so we were really nervous about those again. We go do the MRI. During this time, he writes me a prescription for oxycodone for just pain management to get through the day. And that's when I knew it was bad, because it worked and I could sit in a chair, a hard plastic chair, for class. Like I was finally able to do that again, and I was like, something is not right. Like if this is giving me this kind of relief to be able to function in such a minimal way, something is not right. This is not good. And so it, like, I was excited for these MRI results because I was like, of course something's gonna show up. And I get a call a month later, and they tell me, we can't find anything wrong with you. So basically there's nothing wrong with you. They didn't say that, but that's very much how it felt, and very much how the medical community kind of handled things. They said, we can't do anything else for you. And my prescription for the medicine was only temporary, of course, because it's an addictive substance. And so I was like, this is going to run out. Like, how am I supposed to live my life? Like, I can't do this. And so I was just trying to, it was just, I hate, like, I can't, it's so hard to think about that, because I wish that version of me could have seen my life now and where I'm at. And I got this call in one of my advisor's offices, and they told me that their next step, that they're referring me out to a pain clinic. And I did that pain clinic when I was a child, and all they do is teach you how to live with the pain. And as an adult, there's a few more things you can do. My mom's done all of them. She also has back problems, not as severe as what I've had, but she's back pain and things, and so she's done the things. They can give you an epidural to block the nerve. They can burn your nerve endings off so you feel less. And like that phone call that I got sitting in my advisor's office, I got off the phone and I spent 3 hours uncontrollably sobbing in this person's office, because that was the worst possible news I could have gotten. Like, I was praying that they would find something wrong with me, because my entire life I had been told over and over again, there's nothing wrong with you, we can't find anything wrong, we can't find anything to explain why you're feeling this way or having these symptoms. And I was so afraid of that happening and not being believed, that my quality of life just wasn't a quality of life. My life turned into me just trying to survive the day. Like, I spent the majority of the day in bed and sleeping with like heating packs, ice packs. I'd try to take a hot bath because I was more comfortable to just like float in the water than stand in a shower. Anti-inflammatories, prescription anti-inflammatories, my TENS unit, stretching, physical therapy, like none of it was working. And this doctor's next best steps were to teach me how to cope and live with the pain. And I remember sitting in that office, and I was really struggling with my relationship with the Lord, because I just felt so abandoned in that. I didn't have my support system anymore. It felt like after my friends graduated, like it was hard, they all moved back home. The ministry I was a part of at the time, I just didn't really feel cared for. Like, I kind of felt excluded. I had a lot of people tell me what they thought I should be doing, but nobody really sat with me or comforted me, and nobody really checked in on me, which was so hard. And so I was sitting in I was just sitting there crying after this phone call, and my advisor, she was a Christian lady, and she asked if she could pray for me, and I said no. I didn't want. I was so mad, I was so angry, I was so hurt. And I remember thinking in my head, I will not live my life like this. I'm not going to continue this way. And it was so extreme that I was ready to take action on that. I'm really thankful I didn't, but that's just the mindset I was in. I was basically telling God, like, I'm not gonna live like this. I'll take it into my own hands. Like, I'm not gonna live a life like this. Like, I can't do it. Like, I literally cannot do it. And I called my mom, and I said, I just don't know what to do anymore. And my mom's plan, she wanted me to finish the school semester, but I failed every class except one that semester, which just was terrible. Like, that was the worst semester. And she ended up having to, I hung up on the nurse practitioner because I couldn't listen to this. I wasn't going to do it. And my mom had to call them back to talk to them. And they wanted an answer whether I was going to do that or not. And I told my mom, I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to a pain clinic. I know what that's like. You know what that's like. Like, it just doesn't work. And so she talked to them. And she ended up, the nurse practitioner gave us a referral, actually. She was like, oh, you know, actually, a spine specialist just moved into an office down the hall, and he's been having to help kind of share, like, some of our office staff and, like, equipment just as he's getting up on his feet. Why don't you have an appointment with him? And I said, fine. Like, I was just really angry. I was numb after that. I didn't think anything was going to come out of it. And I was really angry with the Lord because I prayed so hard. I was like, I was supposed to be here this semester. Like, please make a way. And that whole semester just felt like a waste. I still don't fully understand. And I don't think I'm ever going to, and that's okay. I don't need to know. But I ended up going to this doctor, and I was able to get in to see him within 30 days of being referred, which is absolutely unheard of. Like, that never happens. Usually it's a 90-day wait or more. So I was really thankful I was able to get in very quickly. Really thankful that the Lord orchestrated all of that. Because we did my x-rays, and he was asking me a lot of questions I'd never been asked before. He's a spine specialist, and he was asking me about other joints in my body, about pain. He was seeing, like, how flexible I was. I understand. I was like, I'll just do anything at this point. And I was having a lot of pain in all of my joints, my knees, my elbows, my hips, my hands, things like that. I was overly flexible. And when my x-rays came back, I could not believe that the previous doctor I was seeing did not catch on to any of this. Like, I guess it's just not his specialty. I don't know. But it was discovered that I had a third type of curvature that had developed in my spine. It was called lordosis, which just meant that it was like my kyphosis curve in my shoulders, but it was in my lower back, and instead of it being like out, it was in, so my pelvis was rotated. So my spine had an S curve, like side to side, and then when I turned to the side, I was hunched, and then I had this like steep curve in my low back, which was probably causing a lot of my pain. And it was like compressing on a lot of my discs, which were not healthy. And then I'll never forget the words he told me. He said, if it wasn't for the fact that you were having pain in other joints than just your back, we would be discussing options for surgery today, potentially, because I was in that gray area. My curvatures weren't so bad that I had to have surgery, but they weren't so good that I didn't need surgery. Like I was in that gray area, and my quality of life obviously wasn't very good. And he said, I think that you have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was like, what is that? And out of all the things that I was tested for as a child, they never tested me for EDS, and I had so many of the symptoms. I had stomach problems. It would explain my idiopathic scoliosis. It would explain my problems with other joints and things like that. I have vision and dental problems. My teeth are really compacted, and that would explain all of that. It could even explain potentially why I have ADHD, because Ehlers-Danlos syndrome has different subtypes. One of them is hypermobile, and to even get diagnosed with this, you have to go to a geneticist to like do all the extensive testing. And as of right now, there's only 13 subtypes. The hypermobile, or AGDS, is the only one that doesn't show up on genetic testing. They don't have genetic markers for it. Which is crazy to me. I will say that in 2026, they are updating all of their criteria. There's going to be new subtypes added. I still have yet to have an official diagnosis. I had to go see a rheumatologist. Nobody wants to give me the diagnosis. Nobody wants to do the tests, all of that stuff. But I'm looking forward to potentially maybe getting an actual diagnosis in the next few years. But back to the story. He said you hit like 90% of the markers. They do a test where they like test all of your joints and stuff, and you said you hit most of those. You're having joint problems, and it would explain why I have scoliosis in the first place. HEDS is genetic, and so it means someone passed it down to me, most likely on my mom's side, because she has joint problems, and she has similar problems and health issues that I do, and my grandmother also has those same problems, and so does my sister. So I can see where it's traced back, but Ehlers-Danlos syndrome affects the collagen and connective tissue in your body, so it makes everything more stretchy than it's supposed to be, so that would explain hyperflexibility in joints. There's a whole, I could spend an entire 40 minutes talking about this subject just in general, but it would explain the reason that I had scoliosis. And the thing about scoliosis is your curvatures are supposed to stop progressing once you reach the age of maturity if you're diagnosed as a child, because elderly people can be diagnosed later in life. But if you're diagnosed as a child, Your curvature should not keep progressing past maturity, which is like the ages of 16 or 17 for girls, because that's when your growth plates close. So, ideally, my curvature should have been, I think it was around 28 degrees for my scoliosis when I graduated from high school. They shouldn't have continued to progress, and my curvatures were in the 30s and 40s, and I had my kyphosis was, I think, 70 or 80s, and I don't remember the lordosis, but I had never been diagnosed with lordosis before, so this was getting worse over time. And so the goal was for me to go see these other doctors to make sure that there wasn't ulterior treatment modes that I could have, because having your spine fused is a really big deal, and there's a lot of risks with it. It's very invasive, and it's permanent. You can't undo it. But I did all those things. I was supposed to come back and see this doctor again in 3 months. Well, I went back to school. It had been a month, and I said I can't do it. My mom wanted me to finish out my semester. I did. I should have just withdrawn from university because it was so bad. I just wasn't doing well. But we called back and was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't take this. Like, I have gone to these doctors. Here's what they've said. Yada, yada, yada. And we made a plan for my next appointment. I finished out school there, which was really hard because the thing I had going for me at the time was the ministry I was involved in. And technically I was a senior, but I didn't get a senior goodbye. I had to watch everyone else get a senior goodbye, and nobody really seemed sad for me, which was really hard. It was really hard. And so when I left school, I had a feeling that I would not be returning to that particular university, and that made me really sad because it just felt like nobody really cared to see me go, which is just hard. But I came home and I went back and he did more x-rays, and we decided on surgery. And I ended up having surgery right before I was supposed to go back for my 3-month mark. My surgery was really extensive. I was on the table for 10 hours. They had to cut open my entire back. I love telling this story. People are always kind of grossed out by it, but I don't know, it's cool for me to talk about. Very traumatic experience though. Looking back on it, I pray to God that I would never have to have any hardware replaced or fixed in the future, because that surgery was the hardest thing I've had to do in my life. But I was on the table for 10 hours, and because of what they needed to do, my surgery could not be minimally invasive, and so they had to cut my entire back open. And then my surgeon said he had to take my muscles and kind of stretch them off the bone to get access the way he needed to. And then even to just be able to stand my spine up straight, the little tails on some of the vertebrae he had to remove because of how compacted my spine was. And then essentially my back was broken in 10 different places. And then they put 2 screws in each vertebrae and a rod on each side to stabilize my spine. So I had, I think. It was either 27 or 29 screws, so 2 for each vertebrae. And it was odd because one of my vertebrae wasn't fully formed. And I also found, and the reason for this was because I had something called spina bifida occulta, or something like that, which just means I had some of the vertebrae on my spine the bones didn't fully close. I had never heard that before until I met this doctor. I was like, why didn't I hear this when I was a kid? I've had x-rays of my back my entire life, and you guys have never found this? Because my cousin has spina bifida, so I just think that's an interesting, yeah, that's just interesting to me. But they could like put one screw in that vertebrae that wasn't fully formed. And then he sewed me back up, and my curvatures were so bad. So he fused 90% of my spine, and I'll throw up. I have the x-rays, my before and afters, and I'll let you guys see those if you want. So you could look. They're gonna be probably over here somewhere. But a large portion of my spine was fused. And my curvatures were so extreme that after my surgery, I grew almost 2.5 inches just in my torso because of how crooked my spine was. Basically, because of my hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, my spine could not support itself, and it was just essentially collapsing in on itself. And it was only going to get worse with time. So I had to have surgery to stabilize it. My surgeon said that even just the x-rays from the first time I met him up until right before surgery, it was either like a month or like 2 months or something, my curves had progressed some even then. So I was on a downward slope for that, for sure. But then I had to relearn how to walk and sit up and like roll over in bed because the amount of extreme pain that I had was insane. And this surgery, one of the risk factors is that it could cause paralysis or permanent nerve damage, or you could have the surgery, but it may not fix the pain you're having. You may still have the pain. So it's like, what's the point of the surgery anyways then, right? Thankfully, I had an amazing surgeon. Fun fact, he and his team actually came to my wedding recently, like 2 months ago, which was just so cool. That happened. I'm just really thankful, because they really did change my life. But what was I talking about? I don't remember. I'm getting sidetracked here. I'm getting all over the place, right? But I had a separate IV in my arm that was connected to a morphine drip, and I had a little button that I could press myself to give myself morphine through this IV, but it was like set up in a way that it had to be on a timer so I couldn't like OD essentially. But every time it would light up green, I would press it myself to give myself morphine, and I was on that for like 2 days or something like that. There's actually a really funny photo of me after surgery. I was so adamant about having food after surgery because I wasn't going to eat all day. And my mom was like, Abigayle, you're not going to want to eat. I was like, well, just make sure I have food. I was falling asleep eating my food in bed. I'll show that photo. But you can just see like how pale I was, how much blood I had lost. I actually ended up needing a blood transfusion. It was a really long road to recovery. It took an entire year after that surgery to be fully healed, and I still have minimal nerve damage. really that's the worst side effect. I have minimal nerve damage. Sorry, I have minimal nerve damage in my back, and I think that's just because of my nerves getting stretched, and I still have a shoulder blade that sticks out a little bit further than the other one because that's where my kyphosis curve was. And that's where I have some of that loss of sensation. It's not completely numb, but it's different. And then my whole right thigh after surgery was completely numb, and I'm not for sure what caused that. There's still like a few spots in my thigh that are a little sensitive or extra sensitive to the touch. And it'll be 3 years in February since I've had this surgery, and so I don't know how much more of that's going to go away, but it doesn't affect my quality of life. I've grown. I don't know. I don't really notice it anymore as I think about it. But yeah, I had to relearn how to walk. I was so stiff after surgery because every part of the spine that was fused is like immobile now. It's instead of each vertebrae like having that flexibility to move on its own, it's like that part of my spine it's like a forearm. It's one bone now because they fused it with the metal, but they also fused it with a bone graft. So I can't my back is very straight, and so none of that bends. I can bend at the hip, which is really nice. And I can turn, but that's limited because my spine can't rotate all the way, so I'm not as flexible in that anymore. But it's nothing that overly impacts my life. And this is really funny to me actually, but I was never considered disabled before surgery, but having this surgery qualifies me as a disabled person. And I think that's so funny because my quality of life is 10 times better now than it was before surgery. I ended up 9 months after surgery, I scored a part-time job as a baker where I'm lifting heavy things out on my feet for 40 hours. By I'd say 11 months after surgery, I ended up going to that job full-time, which was crazy, but before surgery I never would have been able to do that job. I wouldn't have been able to do it part-time. I wouldn't have been able to do 10 hours of it. It would have killed me, and I had to build up the muscles, but for the most part I didn't have pain for that. And now I can sit in a chair for long periods of time, I can stand for long periods of time. My quality of life is just so much better now, and I have little to no I want to say side effects, but that's not the right word. My surgery went so well, it could not have gone better. I could not have had a better experience. My surgeon was phenomenal. He came, I guess there's rounds and stuff, but he came by every single morning and just sat with my mom and I and just talked with us. And I have never met a doctor who so quickly believed me and so quickly really cared about me as a patient as a whole, which is crazy. That's all I have to say. And I will never see another doctor for my back than him. I don't care if I move somewhere, I'll be driving back to the States to see him. But my surgery cost $500,000. $500,000. Thankfully, I had 2 insurances at the time, primary and secondary. I'd have to pay a penny for it, but I'm trying to think of anything else. I'll maybe throw out some other photos of when I was in surgery and things, but It took me 9 months to recover. After surgery, when I would move, the pain was so severe, and I was kind of disoriented that I would usually vomit from the pain. And vomiting after having your spine fused when your body tries to like retch, 10 out of 10 the worst experience of my life. I couldn't really use my arms because of my shoulder muscles, the way you had to like stretch and pull the muscles and everything. I couldn't brush my hair. I couldn't go to the bathroom by myself. I couldn't shower by myself. Like, I needed help with literally everything. If I couldn't like keep my arms here, I couldn't do it. And I had a nerve block too, and so it was really numb. It was very swollen and just very painful. And my mom had to help me do everything. I needed assistance showering and like going to the bathroom, and just like simple things that you take for granted for probably the first 4 months after surgery. I mean, it got better over time, but it's so hard to think about because I would move too much and I would be screaming and crying. Like, I have never been in that kind of pain before, which is why I say, like, I hope I never have to have any kind of surgery like this again, because literally the worst pain of my entire life. But it was so worth it because I am so much more healthy now. I have such a better quality of life, and I don't have that constant chronic pain anymore. I do still have problems with EDS, and my joints get swollen sometimes and they hurt, and it's easy for me to overstretch, or I've never dislocated a joint, but I do have partial dislocations, I think, where they pop out of place a little bit. I end up just popping them back in. Sometimes that's really uncomfortable, or it feels like I have pressure inside my muscles. And so I have those things to deal with, but I don't have the terrible, chronic, debilitating, I want my suffering to end kind of pain that I had, and I'm so thankful for that. I ended up taking a 1.5 years off of school, and I ended up transferring universities. Yeah, I transferred universities. I started as part-time as a student because I didn't want to like overwork myself, but I was also working full-time. I am really proud of myself because as I film this right now, I will be graduating in a couple of weeks with my bachelor's finally. It's just so exciting because there have been so many times and moments that I have wanted to give up and throw the towel in because I've just been frustrated. They say a bachelor is supposed to take 4 years, and for me it has taken a total of 7.5. I've not been in school the whole time. I took that 1.5 years off. I've done summer classes over the years too and things like that, and so it's been a really long time, and sometimes I get self-conscious about the length of time that it took, but I literally got to college, had a house fire, found Jesus, went through a lot of personal family things with my family and my sister. That's not my story to tell, but went through that, ended up having COVID happen, the world shut down, and then I had a really invasive, massive spinal surgery where I had to relearn how to do everything. And I took a year and a half off, and I transferred, and I ended up getting married in this time too. Like, that's just, the last 8 years of my life have been so crazy. I can't believe all of this has happened. And then it, like, just having Jesus through all of it has been really comforting at times, and other times I've been really angry and pushed him away. But here's my elf that's really cool. Side note, sorry. But when my family had our house fire, we lived in a hotel for 14 months, and one of the desk ladies at the hotel went, we ended up adopting her into our family. She's like a grandmother to me. I love her so much. She is our honorary family member. She joins us for all of the holidays. I love her. But I learned several years ago, when I moved home from university right before surgery, I learned that she went to a church that the ministry group I was involved in had a conference at one time. And so because of that, I figured they had similar beliefs and ideology and things like that, which was really important to me. And so I asked her, I was like, can I go to church with you? And she said yes, and that is now my home church. And like, that's a crazy turn of events. Just thinking about Jesus and things and how that has lined up. But I don't know, I'm really thankful for the life that I have now, and things look a lot different than I had planned, but they're a lot better than I could have planned. And some days it's hard knowing that there's not a cure for some of the stuff I struggle with, and this will be a lifelong battle. And I do fear, I'm starting to notice that I'm having more problems with my shoulders and my shoulder blades and my upper neck above the fusion. I'm noticing a lot more stiffness and pain and just things like that. And so I worry how that will look in the future, because I really don't want to have another fusion. That's not my goal. But some days it's hard knowing that there's not a cure for this, that I can't just take a pill and be better, or have a treatment and be better, that this is going to be a lifelong battle, and it very much could get worse as I get older, and I could have a lot more health issues. And some days that's really hard to worry about, especially when some days I can have really bad symptom days in terms of pain and brain fog. I also believe that I have something called POTS, which is postural orthostatic syndrome, I think. And it just means, I don't know a lot about it, actually. But I do have dysautonomia, and my blood pressure does spike when I stand up or change postural positions, which is why POTS is a postural thing a lot of times. And I can get dizzy and lightheaded, and I can have symptoms with that, and I can have a racing heart and things. I'm right on the border of low blood pressure. Usually my blood pressure is like 100/60. And I went to a doctor, and he refused to do a tilt table test, which is frustrating. But while that's frustrating, and these will be lifelong things I have to battle, I would consider myself very fortunate and blessed, because I've seen a lot of other people online and influencers and things who have a lot worse symptoms and a lot worse quality of life than I do, and it's very possible I could have that one day. I hope to God I don't. There are things I can do that will help treat the symptoms. I like to drink a lot of electrolytes and keep salt in my diet. carbs help a lot. I feel like, personally for me, I know everybody's different. And I say this in terms of my testimony because a lot of people like to say that Jesus only gives his strongest battles to his strongest fighters, or he specifically chose this for me, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. He specifically chose it for me. I think this could just be a symptom of sin in the world and just things not being perfect, because that's the world we live in. I don't think Jesus specifically decided that I would be the person to suffer from all of these things. I mean, I guess that could be true, but I don't know if I necessarily believe that whole entire story. I do know that he has also not taken it away. That's not a bad thing. It makes me think of a TV show called The Chosen, and Jesus is talking to one of his disciples who wants to be healed of, I think, a limp or leg pains. And Jesus said that, that is a good story to be healed from that, but a better story is living with that and following and worshiping and serving a God who could take it away, but choosing to live with it and continue to be joyful in life and continue to serve wholeheartedly, and just spread that into the world, essentially. I like to think about that a lot because I feel like that's very fitting for me. I think that that's one of my purposes, is to be able to still witness about who Jesus is while living with these struggles, because life isn't perfect. Life isn't promised to be perfect. And there are people out there who are hurting and who are suffering, who don't know the Lord, but need to know Him, and they need someone who looks like me and has lived a life like me to be able to relate. And while I'm definitely very far from perfect, and very far from being in a mindset where I'm thankful 24/7 that I have these diseases or health problems, but I'm really thankful that I won't have these one day in heaven. This is just my earthly body, and this is not something that I am promised to have to live with for eternity. And I can't wait to be in heaven and not have rods on my back, because I can feel them and I'm very thankful for them, but sometimes they are really annoying and I'm too aware of them, and it makes me have like a panic attack because they feel weird and they ache and hurt sometimes because of the weather. Like, if I become hyper aware of them, like, I can, like, sometimes I'll get sick. And so, like, I'm just excited I don't have to do that. I can't wait to do a somersault again because I don't think I can do those now. But life is hard, but life is good. And I think about all the things that happened the way that they did. Something else that's, I think, quite fitting for this conversation is that when I met my husband, he had been going through life change too, not long, or around the same time I was. We didn't talk about the full details until later, but the same time that he was going through his own personal journey was the same time that I was going through my surgery and recovery process. And so, like, I'm gonna get emotional thinking about it, but it's just so cool to think about, because I spent a lot of my life wondering like why I wasn't good enough, and I questioned if anybody would be able to love me in the way that my husband is, and I questioned why things weren't happening the way that I wanted them to happen, or when I wanted them to happen in terms of a relationship. And it was because we both needed to go through those things first before we met each other, because I think both of those things we went through really strengthened our faith. And it helped make our lives better, just in general. And so going through, like, it's just, it's so sweet to think about. I think it's really easy to forget that God is up there orchestrating everything for us. And I feel like a lot of times we think we need to do X, Y, Z, or we're afraid to make a decision because maybe it'll mess up God's plans. But that's not the case. Like, even if you make a bad decision, like, the Lord will use it and He'll work it into your story. Things will work out the way that they're supposed to.